Hello, I'm Naomi. I'm a singer who sews, and today you get the reveal of Father and Mother Christmas. But first, I have to tell you how we made all of the accessories that make the costume special. So first up, I'm going to modify this lantern I got from Walmart. I'm going to take out the little panes of glass and hopefully spray them with a frosted glass look and stain the wood a little bit so it gets a little bit darker. Potentially also add a bright LED to make it look welcoming and wintry. I began by unscrewing the top of the lantern so I could access the panes of glass. That lantern was put together way better than I thought it was. Once I had all the windows out, I cleaned them with Windex to prep for the frosted glass spray. Alright, so I've got this. I don't know what it will do. It says, for a fascinating decorative Jack Frost effect, spray on windows, mirrors, or glass surface. Which leads me to believe that it will come off if you wash it, so if we don't like it, we can always make it go away and use something else. Ooh, it's stinky. Ice crystals will form within 30 minutes. And while I was waiting for that, I brushed a coat of stain onto the wooden lantern frame, then wiped off the excess after it dried for a few minutes. I ended up spraying 2 coats of frost on both the inside and outside of the glass for more coverage. Unfortunately, the metal tabs scraped the outside of the frost off a little bit, but it ended up not being a big deal.
Spoiler, I don't know what I'm doing.
A couple of years ago, Tyler rescued this perfect branch from its fate in the garbage bin. It's been aging in our garage through 2 whole moves, and now he's finally getting to make use of it. What do you call what you're doing right now?
I don't know, stripping? Professional stripper?
After removing most of the bark, he sanded it smooth. I finished the staff off by coating it with olive oil, which brought out the lovely natural color of the aged oak wood. Maybe I'll eventually use some sealant on it, but in the meantime, I went ahead and decked it out with the garland we got at Johann. For Father Christmas's bag, I'm using this dark brown burlap and lining it with a beautiful green color. I cut about an 8-inch strip from the end of the burlap to make a strap. Then I stitched this into a tube, turned it out, and pressed. I folded the rest of the burlap hamburger style and trimmed my lining fabric into a matching rectangle before sewing the lining. Then I used a double layer of the excess lining fabric to make a pocket for the inside of the bag. The outer shell was constructed the same way as the lining, and I preemptively sewed buttonholes for the drawstring. I put the shell inside the lining right sides together, and sewed along the top edge, leaving an open section through which I could turn the bag and the lining right side out. I wasn't able to get footage of the process, but I top-stitched along the edge, as well as outside the buttonholes to make a channel for the drawstring. I used a 12-foot jute rope twisted back on itself for the drawstring and sewed the strap to the top and bottom of the bag. I ended up having to attach both corners of the sack to the bottom of the strap so that it didn't drag on the ground. Before we could put the belt together, I needed to dye the blank to the color I wanted. So I moistened the leather with water, and the dye went on really evenly and easily. If it weren't for a mishap with the wind, I would have only used half a bottle of dye. After this, I handed the work off to Best Beloved.
Mark right here, where we want
want the general hole to be? Like right on that bend.
We are not leatherworking professionals. Probably go watch Grant's videos at Sisant instead. I'm not sure the way we did this was the easiest or the best way, but it did work. We punched holes for the rivets through both layers of leather. Then once the belt was riveted, I tried it on to mark where the belt holes should go. Tyler's belt was made in the same way. All the pieces for my holly crown were taken from prefab bouquets and wreaths I bought at Johann. These had to be taken apart with an X-Acto knife, but I ended up with more than enough to accomplish my vision. I used some of the thicker wires from the pre-made bouquet as the base for the crown. Then I laid out the elements in a general way before attaching them to the base, but I ended up using more than what is pictured here. Since the plastic plants were all attached to wires, I just twisted the stems around the crown base and secured it with some additional floral wire. The only complaint I have with this piece is that the wreath is slightly too large for my head, so I had to use another headpiece underneath it to make it fit. Alright, it's another day and another accessory for Father Christmas. Today I will be making a hood from leftover cotton velveteen from the hoopland, some linen that I had left over from my kirtle, and I'll put a little bit of silk in there as a really nice visible sort of lining to the hood, hopefully. And then of course it'll be edged in fur because this is a Santa costume after all. The capelet for the hood started out as a big square, but I didn't like the shape, so I narrowed it to a diamond and cut the linen lining. The hood piece originally came from this simplicity pattern, but it ended up needing to be a lot bigger to be overside on the Vikings' big ol' head. So that's the rectangle you see in the middle here. Once I had the final hood lining, I laid it out on the velveteen and cut a thick Liripipe hood freehand. I sewed this together and attached the lining wrong sides together. I didn't feel like sewing the trim on by hand, so I marked the placement and stitched it on by machine, right sides together. That's backwards. I'm gonna change that. Should look like this. 1, 2. Once the trim was in place, I sewed the lining on, flipped it right side out, then attached the hood to the shell, clipped the curves, and whipped the lining down over the raw edges. I made a bauble for the end of the Liripipe in the same way as a self-stuffed button. The diamond shape of the capelet ended up being a little too harsh, so I softened the shape into a curve and added a shoulder dart. I bound the edges of the hood opening in white fur, attached a clasp, and then we were ready for the reveal.